I saved money for years to take my family to Disneyland. It was supposed to be the trip of a lifetime, the dream I had held onto ever since my wife passed away. But the moment we arrived, my own son looked me in the eyes and said, "We don't want you to ruin the trip. Go back home." My heart broke into pieces. They shut me out of everything. And yet, just 1 week later, they called me 98 times in a single night. If you're enjoying this story already, make sure to subscribe to the channel and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I'd love to hear your story too. My name is Walter Hayes. I am 72 years old, a retired bus driver, and a widower. My wife, Helen, passed away years ago, and since then my life has revolved around one thing: family. I have one son, Daniel, and through him, a daughter-in-law named Clara and a granddaughter named Lily. Those three are my world. For most of my working years, I didn't take vacations. I drove long shifts, sometimes back-to-back, because every extra dollar mattered. After Helen died, I promised myself I would create a memory that honored her dream. She had always wanted to take Lily to Disneyland, to see her eyes light up at the sight of the castle, the rides, and the characters. When she passed, I made it my mission to save for that trip, so at least part of her dream could still come true. It wasn't easy. I clipped coupons, skipped nights out with friends, and lived on the bare minimum. Each time I tucked money away into a small savings envelope, I imagined Lily's smile. When I finally had enough, I sat the family down and said, "I've been saving for years. I want to take you all to Disneyland." My treat, Clara's eyes filled with tears. She hugged me tightly and whispered, "Walter, you didn't have to do this. You've already given us so much." Her gratitude warmed my heart. But Daniel's reaction was different. He nodded politely, thanked me, but there was no real excitement. It felt like he was already calculating the details, as if it was more of a burden than a gift. I ignored that feeling. I wanted to believe he was simply overwhelmed. In the weeks leading up to the trip, I grew more excited than I had been in years. I dusted off Helen's old camera, determined to capture every moment. I even bought a simple new shirt so I'd look nice in the family pictures. I told Lily bedtime stories about Disneyland, describing the rides and the parades. She would giggle and say, "Grandpa, are we really going?" I would nod and reply, "Yes, sweetheart. We're going to make memories that last forever." When the day finally came, I felt like a kid myself. We packed the car, and I carried Helen's camera in my bag, close to my chest. I kept thinking about how proud she would be if she could see us. As we pulled up to the gates with the music playing and the castle rising in the distance, I thought the hardest part of my life was behind me. I had made it. I had delivered on my promise. But I didn't know that my dream of a perfect trip would turn into my deepest heartbreak the very moment we stepped inside. The air at Disneyland buzzed with excitement. Families hurried past us, kids laughed, and the smell of popcorn and churros filled the air. I felt a lump in my throat as I looked at Lily. Her eyes sparkled as she tugged at Clara's hand, pointing at the giant castle in the distance. This was the moment I had dreamed of. I imagined taking a picture of her in front of it with Helen's camera and sending it to all my old friends, showing them that I had finally made good on my promise. But before I could even pull the camera out, Daniel stopped me. He motioned me over to the side, away from the crowd. His face was tight, his tone sharp. "Dad," he said quietly but firmly, "we don't want you tagging along. You'll just slow us down and ruin the trip. Go back home." For a second, I couldn't breathe. I thought I had misheard him. "What did you say?" I asked, my voice cracking. Daniel crossed his arms. "We've got our own plans. Clara, Lily, and I are going to enjoy this trip as a family. You've done your part by paying for it, but you don't need to be here." The words hit me like a blow to the chest. My heart pounded as my mind tried to process what he was saying. I had saved for years. I had dreamed of this day. And now my own son was telling me I wasn't welcome? Clara looked horrified. She stepped closer, lowering her voice so others couldn't hear. "Daniel, please don't do this. He planned this trip for us. He deserves to be here." But Daniel silenced her with a glare. "Clara, This is between me and my father. I looked at her then, at the way she twisted her hands nervously, caught between loyalty to her husband and compassion for me. Lily stood a few steps away, staring at us with confusion in her young eyes. My granddaughter, the reason I had worked all those extra shifts, was watching the family she loved fall apart before her. I turned back to Daniel, my voice trembling. Son, all I wanted was to see Lily's face light up, to ride the carousel with her, to take pictures so she could look back one day and remember her grandfather was there. Daniel shook his head. It's not about you. This trip is about Clara and Lily and me. You'll just make it awkward. Don't ruin this. I felt my chest tighten, and for a moment I thought I might collapse right there on the pavement. I wanted to scream, to demand respect, to tell him how many years I had given up to make this possible. But when I looked at Lily, I couldn't. I didn't want her to see me angry or broken. Instead, I forced a weak smile. If that's what you want, son, I whispered, I'll go. Clara's eyes filled with tears. Walter? No, she said softly. But Daniel grabbed her arm and pulled her forward, ending the conversation. I stood there as they walked toward the gates. Lily turned back once, her small hand waving at me. My throat ached as I waved back, trying to keep the smile on my face until she disappeared into the crowd. For hours, I sat on a bench outside the park. I watched other families take pictures, laugh, and eat together. Fathers lifted their children onto their shoulders. Mothers kissed their kids' foreheads, and grandparents stood proudly with arms around the little ones. Every scene I watched was a scene I had imagined for myself, but instead of sharing those memories, I sat alone, clutching Helen's camera in my lap, my eyes burning with unshed tears. Eventually, I stood up and walked back to the bus stop. The ride home was long and quiet. I stared out the window at the families still heading toward the park, their faces full of excitement, while I felt like a ghost drifting further and further away from my own family. That night, my phone buzzed with a single text from Clara. It read, I'm so sorry. I didn't want this. Lily kept asking where you were. I stared at the message for a long time, my hands shaking. I wanted to reply, but what could I say? That I was humiliated? That my own son had treated me like a stranger? I turned off the phone and sat in the dark, the silence of my house louder than ever. For the first time in years, I wondered if I had wasted my life saving for a family that no longer wanted me. The money was gone, the memories stolen, and I was left with nothing but heartbreak. But deep inside, I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't the end of the story. Something told me that the pain I felt now was only the beginning, and that the truth about my family would come crashing down sooner than I could imagine. The night after I came back from Disneyland was one of the hardest nights of my life. I sat in my quiet living room, Helen's camera on the table in front of me. I had imagined it full of photos. Lily on the teacup ride, Clara smiling under the fireworks, all of us together as a family. Instead, it was empty, a painful reminder of the day I had been erased. I barely slept. My son's words kept echoing in my head. You'll just slow us down. Go back home. Each time I replayed them, my chest tightened until it hurt to breathe. I had spent years planning that trip, working long shifts, eating simple meals, skipping little comforts so I could save, and in the end, I wasn't even good enough to be part of it. The next morning, I shuffled into the kitchen, made a pot of coffee, and sat staring at the steam rising. My hands shook as I lifted it. I felt like I had lost his place in the world. My wife was gone. My son had turned away from me. And even though Clara had reached out, even though Lily still loved me, I couldn't help but was holding on to something longer wanted me. Around mid-morning, my phone buzzed again. It was another text from Clara. Walter, I want you to know, what happened wasn't fair. I begged Daniel to let you stay, but he wouldn't listen. Please don't think I agreed with him. Lily cried herself to sleep, asking where you were. I read that message over and over again. Clara's words touched me deeply. For years, I had thought of her as simply my son's wife, but in that moment, I realized she was also a victim of his pride. She had been forced to watch her husband humiliate me, and she had no power to stop it. In her own way, she was just as trapped as I was. That night, I sat on the porch with Helen's picture in my hand. I whispered to her like I often did when the house felt too empty. I don't know what to do anymore, Helen. Do I walk away and protect what little dignity I have left, or do I keep showing up for them, even if they don't want me there? As the crickets chirped in the distance, an answer began to form in my heart. I thought of Lily, the little girl who had waved at me with confusion and sadness as she disappeared into the park. I thought of Clara, who had tried to speak up but had been silenced by Daniel's glare. And I thought of my wife, who had always believed that love wasn't about pride, it was about sacrifice. By the time I went to bed, my decision was clear. I would not cut them off. I would not slam the door on my son, even though every part of me wanted to, because Clara and Lily still needed me. They were living in a house where Daniel's temper and pride were growing stronger, and I couldn't abandon them to face it alone. The next few days, I stayed quiet. I didn't call or text Daniel, and I didn't push their live. But when Clara sent updates, I responded. She wrote things like, "Lily keeps I can see you," and "Daniel has been so short-tempered since we got back." Each man confirmed begun to suspect that my son's cruelty wasn't just about me, it was spilling into his marriage and into Lily's childhood. One evening, Clara called me in a low voice, almost whispering. "Walter," she said, "please don't give up on us. I know Daniel pushes you away, but Lily and I need you more than you realize." Her words sealed it for me. I told her gently, "Clara, I'll never walk away from you or Lily. No matter what Daniel says or does, you'll always I may not have been at Disneyland, but I'll be here when you need me most." When I hung up, I felt something shift inside me. The humiliation I had from Disneyland was still there, but it no longer defined. My worth wasn't ruined, it was tied to the years I had given, the sacrifices I had, and the promise made as a father and grandfather. I realized that walking away would be the easy choice, but staying patient, staying ready, that was what love demanded. I knew deep down that the storm brewing in Daniel's would one day break wide open, and when that happened, I needed to be steady enough to catch the pieces. That night, I put Helen's camera back on the shelf. I whispered, "I'll be ready, Helen, for Clara, for Lily, even for Daniel. If he ever opens his eyes." I went to sleep with a strange calm in my heart. I no longer felt like a man erased. I felt like a man waiting for the moment when my family would finally realize that the one they tried to cast aside was the one they needed most. I didn't know how soon that moment would come. I didn't know that before the week was over, my phone would light up 98 times in a single night, each call carrying desperation, fear, and the undeniable truth that they could not survive. It was a Friday. My phone started buzzing on the table. At first, I ignored it. I was in bed, reading a book, trying to quiet my mind for another long, lonely day. I figured it was a spam call or maybe a wrong number. But then, it rang again, and again. I leaned over, picked it up, and saw Clara's name flashing across the screen. Before I could answer, the call ended. Then, it rang again, and again. My phone wouldn't stop lighting. 10 calls, 20, 30. By the time I set it down, the screen showed 47 missed calls, all from Clara's number. My heart raced. Something was wrong. I finally swiped to answer. Clara's voice came through the speaker, shaky and frantic. "Walter, please, help us. Daniel locked us out of the house. He's been drinking. He's shouting. Lily is terrified. We don't have anywhere else to go." My blood ran cold. For years I had ignored Daniel's short telling myself it was just stress or frustration, but hearing Clara's trembling voice and Lily crying in the background tore through me. "Where are you?" I demanded. "We're outside the house," she said quickly. "He slammed the door on us. We've been sitting here for hours." I tried calling everyone, but no one picked up. "Please, Walter, we need you." "I'm on my way," I said without hesitation. I didn't even bother with shoes. I grabbed my keys, slipped into the first jacket I could find, and raced to the car. My hands shook on the steering wheel as I drove through the quiet streets, my headlights cutting through the dark. The phone buzzed constantly beside me. By the time I reached their neighborhood, the missed call count had risen to 98. 98 times they had tried to reach me, the man Daniel had told to go home and stay out of their lives. When I pulled up in front of the house, my stomach twisted. Clara and Lily were huddled together on the porch. Clara's face was pale, her eyes red from crying, and Lily's small frame shook as she buried her face in her mother's chest. I slammed the car door and ran to them. "Grandpa!" Lily cried, her arms reaching for me. I lifted her into my arm, holding her tight as she sobbed into my shoulder. Clara rapped, her arms around me too, her voice breaking. "Thank God you came. I didn't know who else to call." "You don't need to thank me," I said firmly. "You'll always have me." Behind the locked door, Daniel's angry voice echoed faintly. I could hear him pacing and shouting inside, but I didn't waste a second on him. My focus was on Clara and Lily. I guided them to my car, opened the back seat, and tucked Lily in like she was my own little girl again. Clara slid into the passenger seat, still shaking. As I drove them back to my house, Clara finally broke the silence. Her voice was low, full of shame. "Walter, I should have stopped him that day at Disneyland. I should have stood up for you. I knew how much it meant to you, but I was too scared of him. He's been controlling everything for years, and last night, it got worse. Tonight, I realized I couldn't keep protecting him. I had to protect Lily, and you're the only one I trust." Her confession hit me hard. I had always suspected Daniel's pride was more than just stubbornness, but now I saw the damage it had done, not just to me, but to Clara and Lily, too. When we reached my house, I opened the door wide and said the words I had been holding in my heart for years. "This is your home now, both of you. You're safe here." Clara's tears fell freely as she stepped inside. Lily clung to my hand, her little fingers gripping mine like they never wanted to let go. I led them to the couch, wrapped them in blankets, and watched as the fear slowly melted into relief. For the first time in years, my house felt alive again, not because it was filled with noise or chaos, but because it was filled with love. The love of a granddaughter who needed her grandfather, and a daughter-in-law who finally saw him for who he truly was, a protector, a safe place, a father figure she could count on. As I sat there watching them fall asleep, I thought back to that humiliating day at Disneyland. Daniel had told me I would ruin everything if I stayed, but here I was, the one they called 98 times when their world crumbled. Not him, me. That night I understood something I would never forget. My son may have tried to erase me, but love has a way of finding the truth, and the truth was this. Clara and Lily needed me, and I would never let them down again. The next morning, the house felt different. For years, it had been filled with silence, the kind of silence that lingers after loss and loneliness. But now, I woke to the sound of Lily's soft laughter in the kitchen and Clara's quiet voice thanking me as she poured coffee. For the first time in a long time, my home wasn't just a place I lived in. It was alive again. Clara sat across from me at the table, her eyes tired, but softer than I had seen them in years. "Walter," she said quietly, "I don't know how to thank you. You were the only one who answered, the only one who cared enough to come." Her words hit me deeply. It wasn't about thanks. It wasn't about recognition. It was about finally being seen for who I had always been, a man who put his family first, no matter the cost. Lily skipped into the room with a blanket wrapped around her shoulders and climbed into my lap. She pressed her head against my chest and whispered, "Grandpa, I knew you'd come." Tears filled my eyes as I kissed the top of her head. In that moment, every painful memory from Disneyland faded into the background. Being left out, being humiliated, being told to go back home, none of it mattered compared to this. I had my granddaughter safe in my arms, and that was worth more than anything. As the day went on, Clara began to open up more. She told me how long she had been dealing with Daniel's temper, how he controlled decisions, and how she had often stayed silent to avoid conflict. That day at Disneyland, she admitted, wasn't just about the trip. It was about control. He wanted to show he had the final say in everything, and I let him, because I didn't want to fight in front of Lily. But watching you walk away broke me. I realized he was tearing this family apart, not building it. Her honesty hurt, but it also gave me clarity. For so long, I had blamed myself for being the burden, for being the reason my son pushed me away. But the truth was different. The problem wasn't me. It was Daniel's pride and need for control. Clara had been living under the same shadow, and now she was finally stepping into the light. Over the next few weeks, Clara and Lily stayed with me. At first, it felt temporary, like they were just catching their breath before going back. But as the days passed, it became clear they were finding peace they hadn't known in years. Lily began to smile more, playing in the backyard like a child should, not tiptoeing around tension. Clara laughed again, softly at first, then with more ease as the weight lifted from her shoulders. Daniel called a few times, demanding they return, but Clara stood firm. "Not until you change," she told him. "Not until you respect my father-in-law and give Lily the home she deserves." Hearing her defend me, after years of being silenced, was like a healing balm on an old wound. I didn't celebrate his downfall. He was still my son, and I still loved him, but I refused to let his choices erase me anymore. I had spent too many years believing I was invisible, believing that my worth was tied to his approval. Now I knew better. My worth was in the love I gave, the sacrifices I made, and the family who still needed me. One evening, Clara found me sitting with Helen's old camera in my hands. She sat beside me and said, "You know, Walter, you did take us to Disneyland after all. Maybe not in the way you imagined, but you gave us something better. You gave us a safe place, and you gave us back hope." Her words stayed with me. Maybe the trip didn't end with fireworks and photographs. Maybe it ended with something stronger. Proof that even when the world tries to shut you out, love has a way of calling you back in. 98 times if it has to. Looking back, I see the lesson clearly. Sometimes the people you sacrifice most for are the ones who hurt you the deepest. But love isn't about pride. Love isn't about recognition. Love is about standing strong, even when others don't see your value. Because eventually, the truth comes out. And when it does, the ones who need you most will find their way back to you. Now, as I watch Lily play in the living room, I feel peace. The trip to Disneyland may have been stolen from me, but what I gained is far more lasting. I am not erased. I am not forgotten. I am still a father. I am still a grandfather. And I am exactly where I'm meant to be. If this story touched your heart, make sure to subscribe to the channel and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'd love to hear your story too.